If you go to the gym and work out, you will burn fat. If you go for a walk, you'll also burn fat. And this is not really about fat oxidation percentages or what fuel source your body prefers. This comes down to basics, actual weight loss and overall fat reduction. So what produces better results? Structured exercise or simply being more active throughout the day? Being honest here, most people already sense that general daily movement is probably better when it comes to long-term health and longevity. That is not a complicated conclusion when you think about it carefully. Look at many European cultures. For example, people there do not necessarily follow formal exercise routines, but they walk regularly and stay active throughout the day. And they consistently show better life expectancy compared to more sedentary populations. So from a longevity standpoint, this is not really a debatable topic. However, from a pure fat loss standpoint, the picture seems less clear. Look at bodybuilders. They follow very specific, concentrated exercise programs and achieve extremely lean physiques. Look at elite athletes. They train hard during defined periods and recover deliberately. This creates a strong cultural belief that structured, intense exercise is what it takes to be lean, fit, or even just healthy. That assumption has become deeply embedded in how most people think about fitness. There is now a well-designed study that examined this question directly, and the findings are genuinely worth discussing. We're going to break it down in detail throughout this video. This study was published in PLOS One, and what makes it particularly valuable is that it matched calories between groups. Researchers had participants perform either low-intensity or high-intensity activity for the same total calorie expenditure, so the energy burn was equal across both conditions. The only variable was how that energy was spent. Over 4 days, participants who were normally sedentary were split into two groups. The first group substituted 1 hour of their usual sitting time with high-intensity exercise. So if someone typically sat for 8 hours a day, one of those hours was replaced with a structured workout. The second group did not exercise at all. Instead, they simply cut their total sitting time in half, spending that time either standing or walking around casually. Not brisk walking. Not any form of workout, just ordinary, light movement around the house or their environment. Here is where the results become truly surprising. Remember, both groups burned the same total number of calories. There was no difference in daily energy expenditure. The only thing that differed was how each group spent their time. And yet, the outcomes were dramatically different. The exercise group showed virtually no improvement in insulin sensitivity over the 4 days. None. Meanwhile, the group that simply moved around, without any formal exercise, showed a measurable improvement in insulin sensitivity. On top of that, their triglyceride levels decreased, which is a strong indicator of improved fat metabolism. And their HDL cholesterol levels increased, which is associated with better cardiovascular and metabolic health. Now, from a direct fat loss standpoint, 4 days is not long enough to conclusively say one group burned more body fat than the other. But the metabolic indicators tell a very clear story about which direction each group was heading. When insulin sensitivity improves, your body becomes much more capable of burning fat efficiently. One of the core reasons people accumulate and store body fat when they are insulin resistant is that the impaired insulin signal causes excess glucose to circulate in the bloodstream. That glucose can then be converted into fat through a process called de novo lipogenesis. Alongside this, elevated inflammation, which commonly accompanies insulin resistance, compounds the problem further. There is no serious debate in the scientific community about the connection between insulin resistance and obesity. The chicken or egg question about which comes first is still being discussed, and the honest answer is that it likely works in both directions. Each one can contribute to and worsen the other. When triglycerides decrease, it suggests the body is shifting away from storing fat and moving toward making fatty acids available in circulation, where they can actually be used as fuel. That is exactly the metabolic environment you want to create for fat loss. And perhaps the most important takeaway from this study came directly from the researchers themselves. They wrote, "The present study, performed under free-living conditions, suggests that 1 hour of physical exercise cannot compensate for the negative effects of inactivity if the rest of the day is spent sitting." With that said, structured exercise still plays an important and distinct role, just perhaps not the one most people assume. A paper published in the Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health examined both active individuals and sedentary individuals and found that both groups experienced meaningful benefits in VO2 max and metabolic health markers from occasional high-intensity interval training. Let that sink in for a moment. Active people and inactive people both benefited. That distinction is important because it tells us something significant about what high intensity actually means in practice. High intensity is not an absolute standard. It is relative to each individual's baseline. If you place Usain Bolt and an average person in the same workout, their experiences would be completely different. What feels like a maximum effort for one person might be a light warm-up for the other. The point is that any meaningful surge in effort above your personal baseline, whatever that looks like for you, produce improvements in cardiovascular capacity and metabolic health. It does not require elite-level training. It simply requires pushing beyond what is comfortable relative to where you currently are. So the takeaway is not that you need to go to the gym every single day and grind through intense sessions. Rather, occasional bouts of higher intensity effort serve as an important stimulus, a trigger that initiates positive changes in the body. So how do these two findings fit together? Here is the framework that makes the most practical sense. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis, commonly referred to as NEAT, refers to all the calories you burn through movement that is not formal exercise. Walking to the kitchen, standing at your desk, taking the stairs, moving around while doing chores. This category of movement, when accumulated throughout the entire day, burns significantly more total energy than a single gym session. Period. A third relevant study, published in Scientific Reports, reviewed 3 randomized control trials and produced findings that closely mirror the earlier research. Participants who sat for most of the day were divided into similar groups. One added 1 hour of exercise. The other replaced 5 hours of sitting with light walking. The study ran for approximately 4 days, and the results were largely consistent with the previous findings. The walking group again showed improvements in insulin sensitivity and blood lipid markers. The exercise group did not show those same changes. However, this study added an interesting additional finding. The exercise group did show measurable changes in their endothelial health, meaning the health and resilience of their blood vessel walls actually improved. This is a meaningful distinction. Structured exercise may not outperform daily movement for metabolic markers like insulin sensitivity and triglycerides, but it does provide specific vascular benefits that casual walking does not produce in the same way. And notably, researchers suggested that the effective dose for this vascular benefit was probably achievable with less than a full hour of exercise, meaning you do not need lengthy sessions to capture this particular benefit. So what does the full picture look like when you combine all of these findings into a practical approach? The evidence points toward a clear and straightforward strategy. Reduce the amount of time you spend sitting. Walk as much as reasonably possible throughout your day. Prioritize consistent, low-level movement woven into your daily routine, rather than treating activity as something that only happens during designated workout windows. Focus on eating quality food that genuinely supports your energy and keeps you feeling well enough to stay active. And here is a counterintuitive but evidence-backed point. Eating more, specifically more high-quality, nutrient-dense food, and moving more is likely a more sustainable and effective approach than the conventional advice of eating less and moving more. The goal is to keep energy moving through the system efficiently, not to restrict the system into performing. Then, layered on top of that active lifestyle, incorporate structured exercise a few times per week at a genuinely challenging intensity. Not necessarily long sessions. Not necessarily every day, but consistent enough and intense enough relative to your current level to keep providing the physiological stimulus your body needs to continue adapting. If you are an everyday person trying to improve your body composition, metabolic health, and long-term well-being, the research is pointing you toward a two-part approach that most fitness culture tends to overlook. First, your baseline daily activity level matters more than your gym sessions when it comes to fat loss and metabolic health markers. Walking more, sitting less, and staying gently active throughout the day consistently outperformed 1 hour of intense exercise in terms of insulin sensitivity, triglyceride levels, and HDL improvement, even when total calories burned were identical. Second, occasional high-intensity effort relative to your own baseline remains valuable and should not be skipped. It provides unique benefits, particularly for cardiovascular capacity and vascular health, that low-level daily movement alone does not fully replicate. The combination of both is the answer. Build a more active lifestyle as your foundation, and use exercise as a periodic, high-quality stimulus that keeps your body adapting and improving. That is the framework the research supports, and it is one that is far more sustainable and realistic for most people than the conventional gym-centric model of fitness.